What is your best joke? Cool, I get to tell jokes this entire video. I hope I find some ones I haven't heard before. Story 1. It's kind of a long one, but a good one. One day, St. Peter was manning his station at the pearly gates of heaven, denying or allowing people to enter heaven. Eventually, a guy comes up and starts talking to Peter, and Peter says, "Tell me about the day you died." The guy says, "Oh man, it was terrible. I got off work early to try and catch my wife cheating on me, as I expected she was. When I got home to my 14th floor apartment and found my wife naked, wet, and in bed, obviously she had just been having spicy time. So I searched all over my 14th floor apartment and couldn't find anyone. So I decided to have a cigarette on my balcony. Lo and behold, I looked down and saw a naked man hanging by his fingertips, and in a rage, I grabbed a hammer and smashed his fingers. Lucky for him, he landed in some bushes and started to scramble out of them. So I went and pushed my fridge off the edge. It landed on him and slayed him. But the act gave me a heart attack, and I expired. Peter let the man in and asked the next guy, "Tell me about the day you died." The second man said, "Man, it was awful. I was in my 15th floor apartment doing acrobatics. But see, I have a better range of motion if I'm naked when I do my acrobatics. But I misjudged a jump and fell out of my window and off my balcony. Luckily, I caught myself with just my fingertips on the 14th floor apartment balcony. But then some crazy mongrel came out and smashed my fingers with a hammer. I managed to land in some bushes, but as I was trying to get out of the bushes, the mad lad dropped a fridge on me, and I perished." Peter chuckles to himself and allows the man entry. Then Peter turns to the next man and says, "Tell me about the day you died." The third man says, "Okay, so get this. I'm hiding in a fridge." My favorite part of this joke has always been the absurdity of one man casually throwing a fridge out of the window. And this must be a type of heaven where your soul looks different from the way you look in real life. If those two people were standing right next to each other in line, I'm surprised they didn't recognize each other and start an argument right there. I kind of think they could have both told both sides of their story to Peter at the same time if that happened. Story 2. As Mickey and Minnie were before the judge in divorce court, the judge looked at Mickey and said, "Listen here, Mr. Mouse. I cannot grant you a divorce from Minnie." "But why not, Your Honor?" a stunned Mickey asked. "I have reviewed all the information you submitted to the court, and I can find no evidence to support the allegation that she's crazy," explained the judge. "Oh, Your Honor," Mickey explained, "I didn't say she was crazy. I said she was fracking goofy." I know, the censorship kind of ruins the punchline. A few years ago at Disneyland, my kid was taking pictures with Goofy, and I asked if they had heard the one about Minnie and Mickey in divorce court. Goofy immediately started shaking his head and waving his hands, trying to stay in character while also trying to stop me from telling the joke. I could hear laughter from within the costume. I'm guessing they probably heard it on a daily basis. To be sharp enough to get the characters to almost break, but not so edgy that you get escorted out of the park. Didn't think of it then, but in line, but yes, pretty much what I was aiming for. On a related note, a relative of mine was at Disney World, and there was a shop with a sign that read, "We will print anything on a t-shirt." He asked the guy working there, "You'll print anything?" And the clerk, a little uneasy, said, "Well..." My cousin said, "How about, I touched Walt Disney's frozen corpse at Disney World?" Clerk was like, "Yeah, no." Of all the places I wouldn't believe would print anything on a t-shirt, a shop inside Disney World is the one I believe least. I'm really surprised they ran with that marketing line at all. Even "We'll print your message on a t-shirt" would be hedged enough to set expectations. I can't imagine how difficult it must be to always stay in character in those suits. My old OBGYN's daughter used to play Merida from Brave at Disney World. I love hearing people's reference relatives of random people in their life, especially doctors. Oh yeah, my dermatologist's cousin actually used to work for Robert De Niro, so... Wow, there was a big old thread there after that joke. I have heard that joke before. I think the whole "we'll print everything" message. I would... That would be a feat. You would win some real life points if you could get them to say, "I touched Walt Disney's frozen corpse at Disney World," put on a t-shirt. Story 3. A termite walks into a bar and asks, "Is the bartender here?" That's a good one. I love bar jokes. Two guys walk into a bar. The third one ducks. A duck walks into a bar and says, "Got any bread?" The barman says, "No, we only have beer." The duck has a beer. A few minutes later, the duck says, "Got any bread?" The barman says, "No, I told you, we only sell beers." "Okay," says the duck. "A beer then, please." The duck drinks a beer. A while later, the duck says, "You got any bread?" The barman sighs with exasperation. "No, we only sell beer. Buy a beer or take off." "Okay," says the duck. "Another beer then, please." He drinks the beer. "Got any bread?" "Listen to you. I've told you we don't have any fracking bread, so stop asking." "But No. If you ask for bread one more time, I'm gonna nail your fracking beak to this bar." "Got any nails?" "No." "Can I have some bread then?" Then he waddled away, waddle, until the very next day. Two chemists walk into a bar. The first says, "I'll have an H2O. The second says, "I will have an H2O too." The second chemist expires. I have to look up what that actually means, what the actual chemical is, but yeah, I've gotten all those jokes. I like the one with the duck. Got any nails, got any bread? Love that one. Story 4. Man goes into a butcher shop. Asks, "What happened to your assistant?" Butcher replies, "Fired him." Man asks, "Why's that?" Butcher replies, "Because he was putting his tool in the bacon slicer." Man asks, "What did you do with the bacon slicer?" Butcher replies, "Fired her as well." Ooh. I heard this as an Ollie and Lena joke. Ollie comes home from work early one day looking real sad, and Lena asks, "Ollie, you're home from work early. You look sad. What happened?" Ollie replies, "Well, I got caught with my ting in a pickle slicer and they fired me." "Oh no," says Lena. "Let me see your thing." So Ollie shows her his thing and everything's fine. "Ollie, your thing is just fine. What happened to the pickle slicer?" Ollie says, "Oh, they fired her too." An old Finnish man I worked with liked to tell this joke. One day, Lena decides to mow the whole lawn herself. When she's done, she's hot and sweaty. Lena, "Oh boy, I think I'll have a beer at the bar." She goes to the bartender and says, "I would like a beer, please." The bartender says, "Okay, Anheuser-Busch?" Lena, taken aback, says, "It's fine. And how's your pecker?" Ollie met a beautiful girl at a bar in Amsterdam, and so he took her back to his place and they made wild, passionate love. After a solid 45 minutes, he lay next to her, panting, and asked gently, "Are you finished?" She got a very quizzical look on her face and shook her head. He took a big, deep breath and jumped back into action. An hour goes by, and he manages again to finish off and is lying on top of her this time, barely able to move. He whispers to her, "How about now? Are you finished?" She looked frustrated this time, sweating and exhausted as she was, and she shook her head no again. "No, I'm not," she panted in between breaths. So being the good sport that he was, and having had the forethought to take his Viagra at the bar, he was functional and got back to it. After 2 more hours of doing his best, he finally popped one more time and couldn't manage any more and collapsed in a lump on the bed, barely able to breathe. After a few moments, he looked at this gorgeous woman he'd partnered with for the night and said meekly, "Please, tell me you're finished now." The woman rolled her eyes to the side and, in between panting breaths, finally said, "Deity, damn it, no, Holly. I'm Swedish." Story 5. What's the difference between an owl, a piano, and a fish? You can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish. What about the owl? Who? Edit. Wow, this blew up. Lots of folks were quick to reference REO Speedwagon, and the owl part seemed to go over their heads. Same thing happened in a meeting with work colleagues a month back. Love that this got many shares with wives, parents, siblings, and friends. Gotta give props to my brother for this joke. I don't know where he heard it, but it was the best clean joke I heard in years. Thanks for the awards, all. Told this to my girlfriend. She walked right into the joke and walked right out of the room after. Just told it to my daughter. Might be the best joke reaction I've ever gotten. I got a rueful sigh from my 8-year-old before he just shook his head. 10 out of 10 joke. Get him! Deity, damn it. Story 6. 3 mathematicians walk into a bar. The barman says, "Do you all want a beer?" First one says, "I don't know." Second one says, "I don't know." Third one says, "Yes." I like that. That's a lot more clever than I realized at first. I'm glad you got it, 'cause I didn't. The barman is asking if they all want a beer. The first mathematician wants a beer, but doesn't know if the second and the third ones do. Since he himself does want one, he cannot refute the hypothesis. All 3 want a beer, just yet. The second one also wants a beer, but still doesn't know if the third one does. He also cannot refute the hypothesis. The third one wants a beer, and since neither the first nor the second mathematician refuted the hypothesis, he can conclude that there is no evidence against the hypothesis, thus he confirms it. 3 logicians. The one with mathematicians is a bit different. An infinite number of mathematicians walk into a bar. The first asks for a beer. The second asks for half a beer, and the third for a quarter beer, and so on. After a while, the bartender gets bored and says, "I'll just give you all 2 beers. You guys should know your limits." Have you ever heard a joke that you know is supposed to be funny and you sort of get it, but you don't quite remember why it was funny because of something you learned in school? That last one is like that for me. I know that for some reason, when you keep having what you want, you're never going to approach getting more than 2 beers. I gotta look that one up, but I remember it being funny. It's weird, right? Story 7. A snake walks into a bar, and the bartender asks, "How?" A blind man walks into a bar, and a chair, and a table. A dyslexic man walks into a bra. If life gives you lemons, make lemonade. If life gives you melons, you might be dyslexic. I have sex daily. Oh, smeg. I meant dyslexia. A dyslexic agnostic insomniac stays up all night wondering if there is a dog. A dyslexic man walks into a bank and screams, "Air in the hands! This is a frack-up!" "All right, mother stickers, this is a frack-up. Throw your butt in the air or I'll blow your hands off." A jumper cable walks into a bar, but the bartender says, "We don't serve jumper cables, get out." But the jumper cable has had a long day. He begs the barkeep to make an exception, and eventually he relents. "All right," says the bartender, "but don't try to start anything." A priest, a rabbi, and a minister walk into a bar. The bartender looks up and says, "What is this, a joke?" A priest, a minister, and a rabbit all walk into a bar. The priest and minister look at the rabbit, and he says, "I don't know." Frackin' autocorrect. Story 8. A lawyer, a priest, and an engineer meet every week for a game of golf. One day, they get stuck behind the slowest group of players they had ever seen. They were hitting the balls all over the place, getting stuck in just about every trap and patch of rough, and missing just about every putt. Finally, the group gets frustrated and heads to the clubhouse to find the manager. "What's with that group of players? They're the worst I've ever seen. They're holding up the course." The manager looks sheepish. "Well, they're retired firefighters. They lost their eyesight running into a burning orphanage to save the children. They love golf, so I let them play for free, for charity." The priest looks ashamed of himself. "As a man of God, I feel terrible for getting angry at those men. At my next sermon, I'll see if I can get a collection going for their families." The lawyer likewise looks chagrined. "Same here. I'll check with my firm and see if we can't open a case to get them awarded restitution for their pain and injuries." The engineer says, "Why can't they play at night?" Story 9. Bear walks into a bar and says, "Can I have a Coke?" Bartender says, "What's with the big paws?" Bear says, "I don't know. I was born with them." When telling this one in a bar, I make the pause super long. People gotta wait for that punchline. There was a guy in high school that landed a date with the hottest girl in class for the prom. First, he went to pick out a suit and had to wait in a huge line. Then he went and picked out flowers and waited in a huge line. Even when he called around for limos, he had to wait in hold lines for all of them. Getting ready for after the prom, there was even a long line at the pharmacy. Finally, the big night arrives, and he takes his dance to the prom. When they get there, he asks his date if she wants him to get drunk, and she says yes. Much to his surprise, there was no punchline. I'm a middle schooler, and I tell a variation of this joke in class around prom season. I tell the actual story of my first prom, but it's the same bit about waiting over and over. It takes a good 2 to 4 minutes to tell the story. The collective groan when they realize how bad of a joke it is, and the confused looks on those who don't get it, is priceless.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 10. My grandfather has the heart of a lion and a lifetime ban from the zoo. Stephen King once said something like, "People think I'm this scary guy, but really I have the heart of a small boy. I keep it in a jar on my desk. I want to pass away peacefully in my sleep, not screaming in terror like the passengers in his car." My grandpa passed away recently because none of us knew his blood type. In the lead up to his last breath, he kept telling us all to be positive. I'm trying, Grandpa. I have an EpiPen. My friend gave it to me when he was expiring. It seemed very important to him that I have it. I'll never forget what my grandfather said to me right before he passed. "Stop shaking the ladder, you little smeg." My grandfather downed 5 German planes during World War II. He was the Luftwaffe's worst mechanic. Story 11. This woman goes into a funeral home to make arrangements for her husband's funeral. She tells the director that she wants her husband to be buried in a dark blue suit. He asks, "Wouldn't it be easier just to bury him in the black suit that he's wearing?" But she insists that it must be a blue suit and gives him a blank check to buy one. When she comes back for the funeral, she sees her husband in the coffin and he's wearing a beautiful blue suit. She tells the funeral director how much she loves the suit and asks how much it cost. He says, "Actually, it didn't cost anything. The funniest thing happened. As soon as you left, another corpse was brought in, this one wearing a blue suit. I noticed that they were about the same size and asked the other widow if she would mind if her husband were buried in a black suit. She said that was fine with her, so I switched the heads." Story 12. A favorite of mine that I saw somewhere is, a man walks into a bar and says to the bartender, "I've got a little man that plays the piano in my pocket." The bartender doubts the man, but the man insists, "If I can show you him, will you give me a free drink?" To which the bartender obliges. The man takes him out, who's only about 10 inches in height, and he plays a little tune. When the amazed bartender is handing the man his free drink, the man asks, "If I show you how I did it, will you give me another free drink?" The curious bartender obliges, and the man says, "There's a little wizard in my other pocket that grants wishes." The bartender hands him another free drink, and the man makes his third and final request. "If I let you make a wish, will you give me another free drink?" The bartender obliges and says, "I wish for $1,000. But after he says it, 1,000 ducks fill the room. Angered, the bartender exclaims, "I didn't ask for 1,000 ducks." To which the man replies, "Well, do you think I wanted a 10-inch pianist?" Story 13. What's a foot long and slippery? What's brown and sticky? A stick. What's orange and sounds like a parrot? A carrot. What do you call a French guy wearing slippers? Philippe Philop. What's brown and rhymes with Snoop? Dr. Dre. Why does Snoop carry an umbrella? For drizzle. Or in case of a Lil Wayne. What's red, brown, and sticky? That same bloody stick. Love it, and reminds me of another favorite. Where does a king keep his armies? His sleeveys. Oh, that's so dumb. Story 14. A man goes into the doctor and says, "I think I have hearing problems." Doctor. "Well, can you describe the symptoms?" Man. "Sure. Homer is fat and Marge has blue hair." A man tells his friend that he thinks his wife's hearing is going bad. His friend told him to ask a question from afar, get closer, and ask again if she doesn't respond. So he goes home and tries it. He asks, "What's for dinner?" No response. So he got closer and asked again. He did this 2 more times, and finally he heard from his wife. "For the 4th time! Chicken!" I had to take my mom's hearing aids for repair, and this joke was told to me by a gentleman in their office. This was yesterday, and I'd never heard that joke before. Story 15. Someone found a hole in the nudist colony fence. Police are looking into it. Someone stole all the toilets from the police station. The police have nothing to go on. Wheels stolen from police cruisers. Police searched tirelessly for suspects. The reins were stolen off the mounted police's horses. The cops have no leads. A woman reports that a psychic stole money out of her purse during a seance. The detective requests a description, to which the woman replies that the clairvoyant was about 5 feet tall. The detective squawks into his radio, "Be advised, we have a small medium at large." Story 16. How do you tell the gender of an ant? Throw it in the water. If it sinks, it's a girl ant. But if it floats... Ants are amazing creatures. Did you know it's impossible for viruses to spread throughout an ant colony because of all the little antibodies? It's buoyant. You're posting that word after. Help me. Thank you, mystery. Story 17. Do you know why divers fall backwards off the boat when they're diving? Because if they fell forward, they'd still be in the boat. You know when geese fly in the V formation, there's always one side longer than the other? You know why that is? Because there's more geese at that side. Story 18. What's the difference between Dubai and Abu Dhabi? People from Dubai don't like the Flintstones, but people from Abu Dhabi do. Sharing this with my Abu Dhabi peeps. I'm going to share it with my Flintstone friends. Be right back. Story 19. I took the shell off my racing snail to make it go faster. If anything, it just made it more sluggish. I had a racing snail. Well, it raced cars, actually. Drove a little car with an S on it for snail, and it was wicked fast. People would see it take off and go, "Wow, look at that S car go." Story 20. What's the difference between a hippo and a Zippo? One weighs a ton, and the other is a little lighter. What's the difference between an old public transit stop and a lobster with breast implants? The script doesn't include the punchline. Story 21. Why do Norwegian warships have a barcode on the side of them? So that they can Scandinavian. That was dumb. Where did Napoleon keep his armies? In his sleeveys, yeah? Where does a pirate keep his buccaneers? Under his buccan hat. Story 22. Yesterday, I couldn't figure out whether someone was waving at me or the person behind me. In other news, I lost my lifeguard job. Not my original joke. Story 23. 2 fish in a tank. One turns to the other and says, "Do you know how to drive this thing?" 2 soldiers in a tank. One turns to the other and says, Story 24. Guy trying to get hired at a farm, and the farmer says, "Have you ever shoed a horse?" The guy says, "No, but once I told a donkey to frack off." Story 25. A photon walks into a hotel, and the concierge comes up and says, "May I take your bag, sir?" The photon replies, "No, I'm traveling light." Story 26. I bought shoes from an illicit substance dealer. I don't know what he laced them with, but I've been tripping all day. Story 27. What has 2 butts and kills people? An assassin. The opposite of an assassin is... Story 28. What do you call a dog with no legs? You don't call it. You go get it. It doesn't matter. It won't come anyway. Story 29. A lady walks into a bar and orders a double entendre, so the bartender gives it to her. Story 30. A Roman walks into a bar, holds up 2 fingers and says, 5 beers, please.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.